town of Bluefern Bend looked peaceful under the winter lights. But beneath the river house, the water was already eating away the ground. Former Navy SEAL Archer Boone wanted only silence, distance, and a place to forget. Then Bishop, his loyal German shepherd, heard the river change direction. No siren warned the town. No machine told the truth. And before dawn, Archer would have to choose between saving a town and losing the only home he had left. Watch until the end and share where you're listening from tonight. Archer Boone arrived in Bluefern Bend on an afternoon when winter could not decide whether to bless the valley or bury it. Sunlight broke through the clouds in pale broken shafts, touching the tops of the pines with silver. At the same time, sleet drifted sideways through the air, tapping against the windshield of his old truck like fingernails on glass. The Skagit River ran beside the road, wide and cold, its surface dark beneath the white glare of the sky. It looked calm from a distance. Too calm, Archer thought. Calm water had fooled better men than him. He drove with both hands on the wheel, shoulders squared, eyes moving constantly. Road, mirror, tree line, bridge, water, exit. Old habits did not ask permission before returning. Beside him, Bishop sat upright in the passenger seat, his cream-gray coat brushed with the faint black shading along his shoulders and back. But the German shepherd's ears stood high, except for the left one, which tilted slightly because of the old curved scar near its edge. His pale amber eyes followed the river, not the road. That was the first thing Archer noticed. Bishop was not watching for deer, people, or passing cars. He was listening to the water. "Don't start," Archer muttered. Bishop did not look at him. That was Bishop's way of saying he had already started. The house came into view at the end of a narrow gravel lane, tucked between a row of fir trees in the bend of the river. It was smaller than the Veterans Retreat Office had described, though not in an unpleasant way. Weathered cedar walls, a deep front porch, a stone chimney darkened by years of smoke, wide windows facing the river. Down the slope, a narrow wooden dock reached toward the water, its boards glazed with frost. A place made for quiet. A place made for a man to rest. Archer sat in the truck for a moment after turning off the engine. He was 46 years old, broad-shouldered, solidly built, with the kind of strength that came less from gym mirrors and more from carrying weight when no one was watching. His face was square and weathered, tanned by sun and cold, with gray-blue eyes set deep beneath a brow that rarely softened. His dark brown hair was cut short, a little rough on top, the sides touched with silver. A neat short beard shadowed his jaw, trimmed but still giving him the look of a man the wind had tried and failed to wear down. He had come here for 3 months. No mission, no command, no one waiting for him to make the impossible decision before dawn. Just a house by a river. He opened the truck door. Bishop jumped down first. The dog landed in the sleet and stopped, not sniffing the ground, not stretching after the drive, not searching the porch for warmth. He faced the river. Archer closed the door slowly. Bishop. The shepherd's tail hung low, not afraid, not relaxed, alert. Every line of him pointed toward the water. The river moved below them with a soft, heavy sound. Archer told himself it was nothing. Then he carried his duffel inside and immediately proved himself a liar. He checked the back door first, then the front lock, then the windows, then the old landline mounted near the kitchen, then the emergency radio on a shelf beside a stack of folded blankets. He walked the rooms once, then again, measuring distances without meaning to. Bedroom to kitchen, kitchen to porch, porch to high ground behind the fir trees. The house smelled of cedar, cold ash, and river damp. Someone had left firewood stacked beside the stove. A faded rug lay before the hearth. D-rug lay before the hearth. On the wall near the door hung an old wooden plaque, its letters nearly worn smooth by age. River Watch House. Archer touched the edge of it with 2 fingers. He did not know why the name bothered him. Maybe because houses should not sound like sentries. A knock came at the open doorway before he had unpacked. An older man stood on the porch, holding a paper sack in one hand and leaning slightly against the sleet, as if he had been arguing with winter for most of his life and had never once admitted defeat. "You Boone?" the man asked. Archer turned. Archer Boone. Hollis bared. The man stepped inside only far enough to get out of the weather. He was 68, maybe more, with a face reddened and toughened by river wind. His beard was short, white, and uneven, and a gray knit cap sat low over thick silver hair. His pale blue eyes looked old until they looked directly at you. Then they looked sharp enough to cut rope. "I live over there." He nodded toward the small white house beyond the wet grass. Bishop came to stand beside Archer, silent. Hollis looked at the dog, then at the river, then back at the dog. "Well," he said, "that one hears it." Archer's expression did not change. "Here's what?" Hollis gave the kind of shrug men use when they know something, but do not feel like defending it to a stranger. "River changing its mind." Archer almost smiled. Almost. Rivers don't have minds. Neither do half the town council, but we still let them make decisions. That earned the old man half a breath of amusement. Hollis held out the sack. Miriam at the cafe sent bread. Said if the retreat program was putting another veteran in the watch house, somebody ought to make sure he didn't live on canned beans and pride. "I have food." "I didn't ask if you had food. I said she sent bread." Archer accepted the sack because refusing would have taken more energy than accepting. Inside was a round loaf wrapped in brown paper, still warm. Hollis looked past him to the plaque on the wall. "Used to be somebody always stayed here during bad weather. Back when folks trusted knees, bones, dogs, and old men more than screens." Archer followed his gaze. "River Watch House." That's what they called it. Hollis's voice thinned slightly, as if the name belonged to someone dead. "This bend talks before it rises. Wood starts ticking. Mud starts breathing. Dogs hear it first." Bishop's ears twitched. Archer noticed. So did Hollis. The old man gave Bishop a brief nod, not quite greeting him, not quite thanking him. "Storm coming warm over snowpack," he said. "If you hear the river under the floor, don't ignore it." Then he left before Archer could decide whether the words were advice, superstition, or warning. By early evening, the sleet had softened into a cold rain. Archer told himself he went to the River Lantern Cafe because he needed coffee, not because the house already felt too aware of him. The town's main street glowed under strings of amber lights. Snow clung to window boxes. A small hardware store stood beside a post office, and across from it, the cafe burned warm and gold against the blue-gray dusk. Inside, the river lantern smelled of coffee, cinnamon, wet wool, and wood smoke. The place was nearly full of adults talking in low winter voices. No one stared at Archer for long, but everyone saw him. The small towns had their own kind of radar. Behind the counter stood Miriam Loxley, a woman of 61 with honey brown and silver hair cut at her chin, a brick-red apron tied over a cream sweater, and eyes so warm they made suspicion feel impolite. She looked at Archer once, then at Bishop, then at the wet shoulders of his old olive-gray tactical shirt. "You must be the man in the watch house," she said. "I must be. And this gentleman?" "Bishop." At the sound of his name, Bishop sat with solemn dignity beside Archer's boot. Miriam leaned over the counter. "Bishop, if you cause trouble, I'll promote you to assistant manager. That's what I do with everyone who looks too serious." Bishop blinked. Archer said, "He's considering the offer." Miriam laughed, a low, rough sound that seemed to warm the mugs on the shelf. "Coffee? Black. Of course." She poured it before he asked the price. At a table near the window, a woman looked up from a spread of maps. She was in her early 40s, with chestnut brown hair tied low at the nape of her neck, though a few strands had escaped in the damp. Her olive-brown rain jacket was still beaded with water, and a weatherproof notebook lay open beside a handheld measuring device. She did not look like someone waiting for a pleasant evening. She looked like someone keeping count. Miriam followed Archer's glance. "That's Elise Trask. She studies the river so the rest of us can pretend it behaves." "I heard that," Elise said without looking up. "I intended you to." Elise finally raised her eyes, green-brown, sharp, tired. "You're Archer Boone." He took his coffee. "News travels fast. In Bluefern Bend. News gets lonely if it doesn't." Miriam pointed at the empty chair across from Elise. "Sit. Both of you look like people who would rather stand until someone gives up first." Archer should have taken his coffee and left. Instead, Bishop moved first. The dog crossed to the window near Elise's table and stood facing the dark line of the river beyond the glass. That settled it. Archer sat. Elise watched Bishop for a moment. He's been doing that long? Since we got here. Smart dog? He's usually smarter when people don't compliment him. A faint smile touched her mouth. The river's rising in the wrong rhythm. Archer looked at the maps despite himself. Wrong rhythm? Warm rain over old snowpack. Elise tapped the notebook with her pen. Looks harmless until it isn't. The sensors upstream say everything is stable. You don't believe them. I believe rivers before machines. Outside, rain blurred the window. Bishop's reflection hovered over the glass like a pale guardian spirit, though there was nothing supernatural about him. Only muscle, breath, memory, and instinct. Archer drank his coffee. It was strong enough to wake the dead and insult them for sleeping. I'm not here for town business, he said. Elise glanced at his boots. Mud still on them from checking the slope behind the house. Then at the way he had chosen the chair facing the door. Then at Bishop, who remained angled toward the river, even in a room full of food and warmth. No, she said gently. You're here to rest. There was no mockery in it. That made it worse. Archer looked away first. For a moment, the cafe noise thinned. The clink of cups, the murmur of voices, the soft hiss of the espresso machine. All of it fell behind the sound of rain against the windows. He had been told by doctors, by former commanders, by men who said, brother, while avoiding his eyes, that rest would help. Rest, as if the soul were a sprained ankle. Rest, as if silence did not sometimes grow teeth. Then Bishop turned his head sharply, not toward the door, toward the floor. A low growl trembled in his chest. Several conversations paused. Miriam looked up from the counter. Elise stopped tapping her pen. The growl faded almost as soon as it began. Bishop sat again, calm as carved stone. Archer's hand had already moved halfway toward the empty space where a sidearm would once have been. He lowered it slowly. Elise noticed. She said nothing. That silence, more than any question, kept him at the table another minute. When Archer finally stood to leave, Miriam wrapped 2 slices of pie in wax paper and pushed them into his hand. I didn't order pie. No, she said. You look like someone who wouldn't. Outside, the rain had sharpened back into sleet. The house was dark when Archer returned, except for the small porch light he had left on. The river moved beyond it, unseen but present. Bishop jumped from the truck and went straight to the edge of the porch again. Inside, Archer said. Bishop obeyed, but reluctantly. That reluctance followed Archer through the evening. He built a fire, ate 1 slice of pie standing at the counter, did not admit it was excellent, unpacked only what he needed, clean socks, a spare shirt, a folding knife, a small frame photograph he did not place anywhere. It stayed in the duffel. By midnight, the storm had strengthened. Sleet struck the windows in hard little bursts. Wind moved along the eaves like fingers searching for a loose board. Archer lay in bed without sleeping, listening to the house learn the weather. Bishop was not on the rug. Archer opened his eyes. The German shepherd stood in the bedroom doorway, blocking it, body rigid. His head was lowered. A growl rolled out of him so softly it seemed to come from the walls. Archer sat up. Then he felt it, a tremor beneath the floorboards. Not large, not violent, not even steady. A slow, deep shudder passed through the house, the way a giant animal might shift in its sleep beneath the earth. Archer swung his feet to the floor. The old boards were cold under his soles. Bishop. The dog backed toward the hall, eyes never leaving him. Archer pulled on his boots and grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand. By the time he reached the front door, Bishop was already there, waiting, breath fogging in the dim room. Outside, the world had turned black and silver. Sleet streaked through the flashlight beam. The river below the porch was no longer a quiet shape in the dark. It sounded fuller now, heavier. Not roaring, not yet, but speaking in a lower voice. Bishop bounded down the steps toward the small dock. Easy, Archer called, following. The wooden boards were slick under his boots. Cold rain needled his face. The Bishop stopped near the first section of the dock, lowered his head, and began clawing at one old plank near the bank. The sound scraped through Archer's nerves. He crouched beside him and aimed the flashlight between the boards. At first, he saw only black water. Then the beam caught movement. The current beneath the dock was not flowing cleanly downstream. It curled back under the bank in a tight, dirty spiral, tugging at roots and mud beneath the foundation slope. Small chunks of earth broke loose and vanished into the dark. Archer's jaw tightened. The river was eating backward. Bishop stood beside him, rain shining along his cream-gray neck, the small metal drop on his collar trembling with each breath. A low rumble moved through the ground again. This time Archer heard it clearly. Not thunder, not traffic. And the sound rose from beneath the house, beneath the dock, beneath the skin of the valley itself. He leaned closer to the water, one hand braced on the wet plank, and felt something old in him open its eyes. For months, he had believed the part of him that protected was gone, burned out, left behind in some foreign flood with a voice on the radio he could not save. He had come to Bluefern Bend to be nobody, to sit beside a river and let winter cover his tracks. But Bishop stood in the sleet like a sentry. The house behind them bore the name River Watch, and the river, dark and breathing, had begun to speak. Archer rose slowly. "All right," he said, though he did not know whether he was speaking to Bishop, the house, the river, or the buried part of himself that had just answered. Bishop looked up at him. The rain kept falling. And for the first time in many months, Archer Boone felt the old instinct return. Not the hunger for battle, not the sharp machinery of war, but something quieter and heavier. The need to protect what had not yet been lost. Morning came to Bluefern Bend dressed like forgiveness. The storm had thinned before dawn, leaving the valley washed in pale winter light. Snow clung to the roofs in soft white layers, and the fir trees beyond the river stood dark and solemn beneath their frozen crowns. The Skagit moved below them with a silver sheen, calm enough to reflect the sky, cold enough to make the reflection feel like a lie. Archer Boone stood on the porch of River Watch House with one hand wrapped around a tin mug of coffee. Bishop sat beside him, the cream-gray German shepherd's gaze fixed on the bend where the river curved past the dock. The dog had not slept much. Neither had Archer. The old plank Bishop had clawed at during the night still bore fresh scratches. Beneath it, the ground near the bank looked darker than it should have, wet in a way that did not belong to ordinary rain. The archer had crouched there at first light, checking the mud, the roots, the angle of the water. He had no official training in river science, but he knew erosion when he saw it. He knew what it meant when solid ground began giving itself away quietly. The valley was beautiful. That made him trust it less. By 8, the town below the hill had awakened into a postcard. Bluefern Bend's main street glowed under strings of amber bulbs left hanging for the winter festival. Men and women in heavy coats swept snow from storefront steps. A florist arranged bare willow branches and red berries in a barrel outside her shop. Steam lifted from the bakery vents, and somewhere down the street someone was tuning a guitar badly, but with confidence. Bishop walked at Archer's left knee as they entered town, and the dog's old gray-brown leather collar, with its small metal drop engraved with the letter B, clicked faintly against the tag ring. Archer noticed several people smile at Bishop before deciding whether to smile at him. That suited Archer fine. Bishop had always been the more diplomatic one. The River Lantern Cafe was already busy. Through the windows, Archer saw adults seated with coffee, maps, flyers, and baskets of handmade goods for the festival. The place hummed with warmth and denial. Miriam Loxley stood behind the counter, her brick-red apron dusted with flour and her chin-length silver-brown hair curling slightly from the heat of the kitchen. She slid a tray of apple rolls onto the counter and pointed at Archer with a pair of tongs. "You look like a man who saw something ugly before breakfast." "I saw mud." That's how it starts. And men see mud. Then suddenly, they're having opinions. Bishop sat near the door, still facing the riverside of town. Miriam noticed. Her expression softened, though her voice stayed light. "Your dog doesn't care for our scenery. He's particular. He's right to be." The humor in her face faded just enough for Archer to catch it. Before he could ask, Elise Trask appeared from the back table with a rolled chart under one arm and a weatherproof notebook in her other hand. Her chestnut hair was tied low, damp at the edges from the morning air. Her olive-brown rain jacket looked as if it had already lost one argument with the weather and was prepared for another. "You checked under the dock," she said. It was not really a question. Archer looked at her. "You walked up there?" "No. I saw your boot prints near the bank." She paused, then added, "And Bishop's scratches on the plank." Bishop flicked one ear at his name. Elise set the chart on a cafe table and unrolled it. A few people glanced over, then looked away with the studied politeness of those who wanted to know but did not want to be involved yet. The chart showed the river bend, the slope behind Archer's house, old flood channels, storm drains, road crossings, and a series of sensor points upstream. 3 days, Elise said, tapping one mark with her pen. The new system has shown stable levels for 3 days. Too stable. Rivers don't hold still that neatly, not with warm rain over snowpack. Archer stood over the map but did not touch it. Could be the storm hasn't reached the upper basin hard enough. It has. Elise tapped another note. The ridge stations show temperature rise. Snowmelt has started, and the river should be talking louder by now. Miriam leaned against the counter. When Elise says the river should be talking, she usually means we should listen before it starts shouting. A man at the next table muttered, "Here we go again." Elise heard him, but did not turn. Yes, Wade. Here we go again with math, weather, and the ancient curse of consequences. The man lifted his coffee in surrender. Archer almost smiled. Almost. Then he saw the board on the cafe wall near the hallway. Flood siren test schedule. The dates were written neatly in black marker. Beside them hung a faded photograph of the river from years ago, swollen high against the bridge, brown and furious under a low sky. No one had taken the picture down. No one had framed it nicely either. It hung there like a bruise the town had learned to decorate around. When was that? Archer asked. Miriam did not need to turn to know what he meant. 19 years ago. Elise's pen stopped moving. The cafe seemed to continue as before, but the air changed slightly. The way air changed when someone spoke the name of the dead at a dinner table. No one died, Miriam said after a moment. That's what people say first, as if losing everything else is just weather. Archer looked out the window. The main street shone under winter sun. A banner stretched between two lampposts read, Bluefern Winter River Fair, art, music, lodging, lights. A smiling town selling warmth beside a river that had once eaten its floorboards. Elise followed his gaze. The festival starts tomorrow evening. Adult craft vendors, winter tours, food stalls, music at the inn. Every room within 10 miles is booked. Bad time to mention flooding. There's never a good time. Her voice sharpened, then softened. But this one is especially inconvenient. Archer understood inconvenience. In war, people often renamed danger before they admitted it had arrived. Delay became assessment. Fear became caution. A bad call became the situation evolving. He had seen men die inside polite language. A bell above the cafe door rang. The woman who entered carried authority without needing to display it. She was about 49, tall enough to command space, with a sturdy frame beneath a dark brown duty jacket beaded with melting sleet. Her tan uniform shirt was visible beneath it, and a scratched silver badge sat near her shoulder radio. Her dark brown hair, threaded with a few gray strands, was tied low at the nape of her neck. Her face was square, wind-touched, and tired in the way of someone who still showed up. Miriam called, "Morning, Claire." "Is it?" the woman asked. "That depends whether you want coffee or the truth. Coffee first. Truth ruins the stomach." Elise rolled the map toward her. "Deputy Haddon, I was just about to come find you." Claire Haddon took the mug Miriam handed her, then glanced at Archer. Her eyes, gray-brown and level, moved once over him. Not flirtatious, not suspicious. Assessment without insult. "You're Boone," she said. "River Watch House. That seems to be my full legal name now." Miriam smiled into her coffee pot. Claire did not. "You saw something last night?" Archer told them. Not dramatically. Not with the kind of embellishment that invited disbelief. He described the tremor, the dock plank, the backward curl of current beneath the bank, the wet soil near the foundation slope. When he finished, Claire looked at Elise. "Is that possible?" "Yes," Elise said. "Undercutting at the bend. If pressure is building upstream and flow is being misread, the river may be finding weak places before the gauges admit anything." Claire rubbed 2 fingers against the side of her mug. I can't order a partial evacuation because a dog scratched a dock and a veteran felt the floor shake. Bishop looked at her then. Claire looked back at him. After a beat, she added, "No offense." "None taken," Archer said. "He outranks most people I know." A small laugh moved through the nearest tables, brief, but grateful. Claire's expression eased by a fraction. "I believe you saw something. That's different from having enough to move people. Folks here don't hate safety. They hate being told they misjudged danger, especially when danger costs them bookings, deposits, and pride." Elise leaned over the map. "If we wait for perfect proof, the river will provide it in person." Claire's jaw tightened. "And if I scare half the town over a bad reading, next time nobody moves when I ask." There it was, Archer thought. Not cowardice, not ignorance. The harder thing. Responsibility without enough certainty. He wanted no part of it. That was the lie he had chosen for the morning. Bishop rose. The dog crossed to the cafe door and stood there, not whining, not barking, waiting. Archer closed his eyes briefly. "Fine," he said. Elise looked up. "Fine? I'll walk the drains and the lower bridge with him. No promises, no speeches. If I see something worth your badge, deputy, I'll say so." Claire studied him over the rim of her mug. "You always volunteer this reluctantly?" "Only when I mean it." They spent the next 2 hours moving through the bright little town while the day continued pretending to be harmless. The festival decorations made the inspections feel absurd. Archer and Bishop passed wreaths, painted signs, strings of lights, barrels of winter flowers, and chalkboards advertising mulled cider and live music. Beneath the charm, Bishop kept finding places where the town's smile thinned, a storm grate humming under ice, a drainage ditch pulsing in uneven spurts, a bridge vibrating faintly beneath Archer's palm. Elise joined them near the lower road crossing, crouching to measure water depth with a marked rod. Her face grew still as she read it. "Higher than the sensor report," she said. "How much?" "Enough to be impolite." "Scientific term?" "Highly." At the bridge, Bishop stopped again. He placed one front paw on the frozen edge of the curb and stared toward the dark underpass where water moved in shadow. His left ear tilted. The scar at its edge made the gesture strangely human, like a man leaning closer to catch a confession. Archer crouched beside him. The sound beneath the bridge was wrong. Not louder exactly. Split. One layer of water moving where it should, another dragging somewhere beneath or behind it. Elise crouched on Archer's other side, close enough that the sleeve of her rain jacket brushed his. "You hear that?" "Yes." "Most people don't. Most people aren't trying." She looked at him then, and for once there was no sharpness in her expression. Only something quieter. Recognition, maybe. Or concern. And Archer stood before it could settle. By late afternoon, the sky had begun to dim, though sunset was still an hour away. Clouds pressed low over the valley, turning the town's amber lights brighter by contrast. The Winter Fair banner snapped softly in the wind. Hollis Baird found Archer near the old ferry marker at the end of River Street. The old man carried a canvas sack over one shoulder and wore the same gray knit cap pulled low against the cold. His waxed brown coat smelled faintly of river mud and pipe tobacco. He looked at Bishop first. "He's still listening." "He does that." "So did my wife." Hollis's voice roughened, and he cleared it with a cough. "She used to say the river had moods. I used to say she was giving water too much credit." Was she wrong? Hollis stared at the Skagit. For a long moment, the joking left him. 19 years ago, he said, the siren didn't sound until water was already in people's kitchens. No one died, so outsiders called us lucky. But luck can still leave mold in your walls and silence in your marriage. Archer waited. Hollis reached into his coat and touched something in the pocket, a small shape that gave a faint metallic click. There was a man in your house then. Not military. Just old river blood. Kept notebooks. Measurements by hand. He said the river was wrong 2 days before the flood. Council told him the instruments were fine. What happened to him? Moved away the next spring. Hollis glanced at him. Or got moved by what folks didn't want to hear. Depends who you ask. The wind lifted sleet off the street and dragged it low across their boots. Hollis turned to leave, then stopped. If you find old notes in that house, read them before you decide they're just old paper. Archer watched him walk away, slower than he had arrived. That night, River Watch House felt less empty, not warmer, not safer, just inhabited by questions. Archer fed Bishop, checked the stove, and set his boots by the door without thinking. The wind had risen again, pressing sleet against the windows in silver lines. On the kitchen table lay the rough notes he had made from the drains and bridge. He stared at them too long, then shoved the paper aside. "You and I came here to do nothing," he told Bishop. The German shepherd lay near the door, chin on his paws, eyes open. "Exactly," Archer said. "Terrible plan." The knock came just after 9, 3 soft taps. Archer froze. Not because he was afraid, because the sound did not fit the wind, the house, or the hour. Bishop rose without a sound. Not fit the wind, the house, or the hour. Bishop rose without a sound. Archer crossed to the door and opened it. The porch was empty. Sleep blew in under the light. The gravel lane lay dark. No footsteps moved away. No engine faded in the distance. Then Archer looked down. A metal box sat on the porch boards. It was old, rectangular, and dented at one corner. River rust marked the hinges. A strip of oilcloth had been tied around it to keep out damp. No name, no note. Bishop stepped forward, sniffed the box once, and backed away. A low growl moved through him. Archer carried the box inside and set it on the kitchen table. The hinges resisted at first, then gave with a soft metallic complaint. Inside was a handwritten ledger. The pages smelled of dust, mildew, and old rain. Columns of dates, numbers, river levels, weather notes, marks in the margins. The handwriting was firm and narrow, written by someone who believed details could hold back disaster if only someone cared to read them. Archer turned page after page. The early entries were ordinary. Cold front, rain, snow melt slow, south bank stable. Then the notes grew heavier. Current reversed under watch house dock. Mud hollow beneath lower plank. Siren test normal despite rise. Council says instruments clean. Archer's fingers slowed. Near the back, a page had been torn out. Not carefully. Ripped, leaving a jagged strip along the spine. On the page before it, one sentence had been underlined so hard the pen had nearly cut through the paper. If the siren does not sound, do not trust the silence. Archer sat back. The house creaked around him. The river moved in the dark beyond the glass. The bishop stood beside the table, ears forward, eyes fixed not on the ledger, but on the floor beneath it. For a long moment, Archer did nothing. Then he reached for his notebook and copied the sentence down. Not because he believed in warnings, because he had learned, in places far from Bluefern Bend, that the dead often sounded dramatic only after the living ignored them. By 3 in the morning, Archer Boone had stopped pretending the ledger was just an old man's superstition. The book lay open on the kitchen table beneath the yellow cone of a lamp. Outside, sleet ticked against the windows. The river moved somewhere beyond the glass, unseen, but not unfelt. Every few minutes the floorboards gave a faint, almost polite shiver, as if the house were clearing its throat. Bishop had not returned to the rug. The cream-gray German shepherd lay near the front door instead, chest low, ears angled toward the river. His eyes remained open, pale amber in the lamplight. He looked less like a dog waiting for sleep than a sentry refusing it. Archer turned another page. The handwriting in the ledger was narrow and disciplined. Whoever had kept it did not waste ink on fear. He wrote the way a man stacked sandbags, one line at a time, because order was the only tool he had. Rain on upper ridge. Snowpack softening early. Gauge reads lower than bank marks. South culvert singing under pressure. Dog refused to leave porch. Archer stopped at that line. He glanced at Bishop. The shepherd did not move. "You have ancestors in paperwork now," Archer murmured. Bishop blinked once, unimpressed. The weak joke fell into the room and died there, but it had done what Archer needed. It had put a thin human sound between him and the old panic rising in his ribs. At dawn, he drove into town with the ledger wrapped in a towel on the passenger seat. Bishop sat behind it, nose lowered, as if the old paper smelled not of dust and mildew, but of unfinished business. The River Lantern Cafe had opened early. Miriam Loxley was filling thermoses for road crews, her red brick apron tied tight and her silver-brown hair tucked behind both ears. She looked at Archer's face and did not make a joke immediately. That worried him more than the river. "Elise is in the back room," she said. "Claire, too. Did everyone in this town wake up before the sun? Only the guilty, the worried, and the people who make coffee for both." In the cafe's small back room, Elise Trask had already covered the table with maps, printouts, weather logs, and 2 half-finished cups of coffee. Her chestnut hair was pulled low, but loose strands had escaped around her temples. She wore the same field jacket as yesterday, damp at the cuffs, as if she had stepped outside several times to ask the weather whether it was lying. The Deputy Claire Haddon stood near the wall with her radio clipped high on her shoulder, her dark duty jacket still wet from patrol. She looked tired, but not uncertain. Archer set the ledger down. Elise did not touch it right away. She looked at it the way a doctor might look at an old X-ray that could explain a scar. "Who left it?" Claire asked. No one stayed to introduce themselves. Miriam came in quietly, placed a fresh pot of coffee on the side table, then left without asking questions. That, Archer decided, was one of her rarest talents. Elise opened the ledger. For the next hour, the 3 of them worked without drama. No thunderclap of discovery. No single sentence evidence that explained everything. Just numbers, dates, old rainfall marks, modern sensor reports, and the slow tightening of Elise's mouth. She placed a sheet from the current system beside a page from 19 years ago. "Temperature rise on the ridge," she said. "Same pattern." She moved another page. "Wind shift from the southwest." Same. Another. "Rapid melt after frozen ground." Same. Claire leaned over the table. "How close?" Elise did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. Archer watched the map of the River Bend. Bluefern Bend had been built with the optimism of people who love beauty more than caution. Houses close to the water, roads following old low ground, a cafe warm with light only 3 streets from a river that had once climbed into kitchens. "The old ledger shows the river acting wrong before the gauges did," Elise said. "That's the part that bothers me." Claire folded her arms. "Everything bothers you. Professionally. Can you put professionally into an order I can sign?" Elise looked at her. "Not yet." Claire's jaw flexed, but she said nothing. The room went still, and that silence was worse than disagreement. Disagreement had heat. This had the cold shape of people standing at the edge of what they could prove. Archer looked toward the cafe floor beyond the half-open door. Bishop lay where he could see both the room and the front entrance. His body was still, but his paws twitched every time a truck passed outside, every time water hissed through the gutters, every time the town's drainage system muttered beneath the street. "He hasn't slept," Elise said. Archer did not ask how she knew. "No. Neither have you." He looked back at the map. "Dogs are better at it. Sleeping. Not lying about being tired." For the first time that morning, Elise smiled. It was brief, and it did not survive long. She touched the ledger again, her finger resting near a note about the old flood. "My brother used to say water never made mistakes. People did." Claire looked up, but Elise kept her eyes on the page. He was 37, a field biologist. Different county, different river. Flash flood took him before anyone decided the warning was serious enough. She paused, not because she wanted sympathy, but because the next words required careful handling. They found his rain jacket in a cottonwood tree 3 days later. Nothing else. Archer said nothing. He knew better than to fill that kind of space. Elise looked at him then. "So when people tell me a reading is probably fine, I don't hear caution. I hear delay." The word struck deeper than she could have known. Delay. Archer felt the back room fade at the edges. For a moment, the rain on the cafe roof became another sound. Not sleet, not winter. Rotor wash, static. A voice clipped by water and distance. "Boone, I'm pinned. Say again. Water's moving fast. Hold position. I'm coming. Boone." Then nothing but broken radio hiss and the impossible weight of being alive after another man's voice had stopped. A pressure built inside Archer's chest. He lowered one hand to the table, steadying himself before anyone noticed. Bishop noticed. The shepherd rose from the cafe floor and came into the back room without a sound. He pressed his shoulder against Archer's leg, firm and warm and real. Not demanding, not dramatic. Simply there, a living weight in the present. Archer inhaled. Coffee, wet wool, old paper, dog fur, river damp. Not smoke, not blood, not floodwater in a foreign dark. He placed one hand on Bishop's head, the scarred left ear tilted under his palm. "I lost someone to water too," Archer said. He had not meant to say it. Elise's face changed, not with surprise exactly, but with recognition. Claire looked away toward the window, giving him the dignity of not being watched too closely. Archer withdrew his hand from Bishop's head after a moment. "Doesn't make us right." "No," Elise said, "but it makes us harder to dismiss." That was when Claire straightened. "Then we stop arguing around the table," she said. "It's something I can use." The secondary gauge station sat 2 miles upriver, where the lower bridge crossed a narrow channel fed by the main flow. By late morning, sleet had returned in thin, wind-blown streaks. The world was gray, brown, white, and moving water. A maintenance truck was already parked near the bridge when they arrived. The man beside it looked as if he had been hoping to finish his work before anyone noticed he had started. He was in his late 50s, tall but slightly narrow through the shoulders, wearing a burnt orange waterproof technician's jacket with reflective strips dulled by grime. A black knit cap covered thinning gray-brown hair. His face was long, pale, and lined with fatigue. In one hand, he held a heavy ring of keys that clicked softly whenever he shifted his grip. Elise's expression hardened. "Walt?" Walt Dennison looked from Elise to Claire to Archer, then to Bishop. "Didn't know this was a field trip." Claire stepped forward. "Morning, Walt." "Deputy. This gauge been checked?" "System checks itself." That wasn't the question. Walt's fingers tightened around the keys. The metal gave a sharp little clatter. "Yes, I looked at it yesterday." Elise moved past him toward the sensor housing. And it's within range." "Based on what?" "Based on the numbers, Elise. The numbers are why we're here." Walt's mouth flattened. He was not a villainous-looking man. That almost made Archer trust him less. Evil announced itself less often than pride did. Walt looked like a man who had spent years being useful, and now feared the world had found new machines to replace him. Bishop had no interest in Walt. He went straight to the downstream side of the bridge. Archer followed. At first, nothing looked wrong. Water slid beneath the bridge in a dark, fast sheet. Ice clung to rocks along the bank. The metal housing of the float gauge stood bolted to a support post, its cable running down toward the water. Then Bishop lowered his head and began nosing through a tangled pile of branches caught beneath the edge of the bridge. "Bishop," Archer said softly. The dog pawed once at the debris, then looked back at him. Archer crouched. There beneath the tangle of branches, plastic sheeting, rope, and storm trash, the float cable had twisted around a submerged limb. The float itself was trapped lower than the true water line, bobbing uselessly in a pocket of slack water, while the main current ran higher and harder beyond it. Elise saw it and went very still. Claire came down the bank behind her. "Tell me that matters." "It matters," Elise said. Walt pushed closer. "Debris happens. The system compensates." "No," Elise said, her voice low now. "The system has been reading the trapped float, not the river." Walt stared at the water. The keys in his hand stopped moving. Archer looked at him. "You knew it could do that." Walt's eyes flashed. "I knew it was possible. That's not the same as knowing it happened." "No," Archer said, "but it's close enough to keep you awake." The words landed hard. For a second, Walt looked less angry than exposed. Claire took photos. Elise measured the true water line against the bridge piling and wrote the number down with a hand that stayed steady through force of will. Archer helped cut away enough debris to free the float, though Elise warned them not to reset anything until she documented the discrepancy. Bishop stood above the bank, watching the water with a patience that unsettled everyone. By the time they climbed back to the road, sleet had collected on Walt's shoulders. Claire faced him. "I need access to the upstream status channel." Walt hesitated. Elise's eyes narrowed. "Walt, it's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple." He looked toward the mountains, where the clouds sat low and heavy over the tree line. "If they open the wrong gate at the wrong time, the Old North Channel takes pressure." Elise froze. Archer caught the change. "What Old North Channel?" Claire asked. Walt swallowed. The sound was visible in his throat. "It's mostly filled in now." "Mostly," Archer repeated. Walt did not answer. Elise pulled out her radio and switched frequencies. Static cracked through the speaker. She tried again, angling the antenna toward the ridge. "Upper station. This is Elise Trask at lower secondary gauge. Respond." Nothing. She tried the operations channel. The static. Then a burst of voice cut through, distorted but recognizable. Walt's voice. Not the Walt standing beside them. A prior transmission, caught in the channel delay or repeated through the system. "Don't open the release. If you open now, the surge goes straight into Bluefern Bend." Elise's face drained of color. The transmission crackled again, louder for one terrible second. "Do you hear me? Do not open the gate." Then the radio died into white noise. No one spoke. The river moved below them, higher than the numbers had promised. Bishop stepped close to Archer, shoulder brushing his knee. Archer looked from the trapped gauge to Walt's pale face, then toward the hidden ridge where the upstream gates waited in the storm. The machines had been speaking cleanly. The river had been telling the truth. And now, at last, someone had to decide which voice to believe. By late afternoon, the sleet had become rain. Not the clean, sharp rain of spring, but a heavy winter rain that struck the old snow and sank into it like a warning. It ran from the roofs in silver ropes, dripped from the cafe awning, and gathered in the gutters with a sound too busy for comfort. The mountain above Bluefern Bend vanished behind low clouds, and the river, once polished and silver beneath the morning light, had turned the color of iron. Inside the sheriff's annex, Deputy Claire Haddon stood over a town map pinned to a corkboard. Her radio hissed at her shoulder. Her dark duty jacket was still damp, her boots left slush on the floor, and the scratched badge near her collar caught the yellow light each time she moved. She had drawn 3 red lines through the low river streets and circled the homes nearest the Old North Channel. Elise Trask stood beside her, arms folded, face pale with the anger of being right too early and believed too late. Archer Boone stood near the door with Bishop at his side. He had not planned to be part of this. That thought came to him with such bitterness he nearly laughed. Men like him were always saying that. He had not planned to join. He had not planned to care. He had not planned to hear a river under the floor and answer it like a summons. Claire capped her marker. "We start with voluntary evacuation. River Street, Alder Lane, the lower cabins, and the old ferry road." Elise looked at the map. "Voluntary may not be enough. It's what I can justify before the siren sounds." "The siren is exactly what we can't trust." Claire's jaw hardened. "I know." There was no heat in her voice, only the terrible weight of a person who understood both danger and consequence. If she moved too soon, some would call her reckless. If she moved too late, the river would not care what anyone called her. Archer stepped closer to the map. "Who refuses first?" Claire gave him a glance. "You asking as a tactical question or a human one?" "Both." That earned him something like respect. Claire pointed. "Inn owners, some riverside rentals, a few old-timers who remember the flood and would rather distrust the town than relive the fear. And Nora Voss." Miriam Loxley, who had come in carrying a box of thermoses and bread wrapped in cloth, made a soft sound from the doorway. "Nora won't leave easy," she said. "Why?" Archer asked. Miriam's humor was gone now. Without it, she looked older and fiercer. Her husband built that house by hand. Every rail, every cabinet, every stubborn window that never closes right. He died in the upstairs room 3 winters ago. Nora talks to that house more than she talks to people. Bishop lifted his head at Miriam's tone. Archer looked down at him. The dog's cream-gray coat was damp along the shoulders, and his pale eyes were fixed not on the map, but on the door. as if he already knew the night would not let them stay indoors. Claire began handing out names. Elise would check watermarks and keep updating the safe routes. Miriam would open the River Lantern Cafe as a gathering point. Claire would call volunteers and coordinate with county emergency management. Archer would take Bishop and go door to door along River Street. "You don't have legal authority," Claire said. "I know. Don't threaten anyone." "I wasn't planning to. Don't scare them more than necessary." Archer looked at the rain sliding down the annex window. "That's going to be hard." The first house belonged to a retired couple who had already packed 2 suitcases and 3 boxes of medication. They thanked Archer twice, then argued for 5 minutes over whether to bring a ceramic rooster from the kitchen shelf. Bishop sat patiently by the door while they decided the rooster had survived 27 years of marriage and therefore deserved evacuation. The second house slammed the door in Archer's face. At the third, a man in a quilted vest demanded to know whether Archer would pay for his lost weekend bookings if the river stayed down. Archer stood in the rain and said, "No." The man blinked. "But if the water comes through your back wall," Archer continued, "I'll help pull you out if I can. I'd rather not meet you then." The man cursed, but 10 minutes later, he started loading his truck. So it went. Some people obeyed out of fear. Some because Claire's name meant something. Some because Elise had been warning them long enough that doubt had begun to feel like vanity. Others moved because Bishop stood quietly in their doorways, water dripping from his muzzle, looking less like a pet than a solemn witness. He did not beg. He did not perform. He simply looked at people as if he expected them to choose life. By dusk, River Lantern Cafe had become something between a command post and a church supper after the end of the world had politely called ahead. Miriam had pushed the tables together and covered them with flashlights, batteries, folded blankets, paper lists, thermoses, first aid kits, and baskets of rolls. The windows glowed gold against the rain, and adults came in carrying bags, pet carriers, framed photographs, medicine tins, old radios, and the stunned expressions of people who had been forced to decide what mattered in less than 10 minutes. "Put wet coats by the stove," Miriam called. "Coffee on the left, soup on the right. Panic nowhere unless you brought enough to share." An elderly man near the counter lifted a hand. "If I'm swept away, I want it known I died after eating the best apple pie in Washington." Miriam pointed a ladle at him. "You are not dying in my cafe, Leonard. You still owe me for Thursday." A few people laughed. The laughter was thin, but it held. Archer saw why they needed her. Miriam did not make danger disappear. She made it stand in line, wipe its boots, and wait its turn. Elise entered behind him, rain running from her hood. "Water's over the lower marker at Alder Lane." Claire's voice crackled over the radio from Miriam's counter. "Repeat." Elise picked it up. "Over the lower marker. Not yet in the road, but close." Static answered first. Then Claire said, "Copy. Keep moving, people." Archer looked at the list in Miriam's hand. One name remained circled. Nora Voss. Miriam saw him looking. "She won't answer the phone," she said. "Is she alone?" "Yes." Bishop stood before Archer did. The Voss house sat at the end of a narrow lane below River Street, closer to the bend than anyone should have built, though Love had never been good at obeying flood maps. It was a small cedar house with green shutters, a covered porch, and a garden buried beneath snow. Warm light glowed behind lace curtains. The rain had become harder by the time Archer knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Finally, the door opened just wide enough to reveal a small woman in a long ash-gray coat over a dark purple sweater. Nora Voss was 72, thin but unbent, with silver hair pinned low and a face lined by years of weather, grief, and private discipline. Her eyes were pale blue-gray, watery but not weak. Around her neck hung a wedding ring on a chain, pressed between her fingers as if she had been holding it before she ever came to the door. "I know why you're here," she said. "Then you know I'm going to ask you to come with me." "No." Bishop stood beside Archer, rain beating along his scarred left ear. Nora glanced down at him. For 1 second, her face changed. Not softened exactly. Remembered. "My husband wanted a dog," she said. "I told him one stubborn creature in the house was enough." Archer did not smile, though something in him wanted to. "The river is moving faster than expected," he said. "The lower road may not hold. This house has held before. Maybe." Her eyes sharpened. "Don't use maybe to take me from my home." Behind her, Archer could see the room. Polished wood shelves, framed photographs, a quilt over an armchair, a pair of men's boots still placed neatly near the hearth, though no living man wore them anymore. The house did not look abandoned to grief. It looked inhabited by it. "If the water takes this place," Nora said, her voice dry as old cedar, "let it take me with it." Archer felt the sentence hit him in a place he did not want touched. He had known men who spoke that way, not always with despair, sometimes with devotion so deep it had become dangerous. He could have argued. He could have used Claire's name, Elise's measurements, the water line, the roads. Instead, he stepped back slightly. Bishop moved forward, not past Nora, not into the house, just close enough to rest his head gently against her knee. Nora went still, and the dog stood in the rain with complete patience, his wet fur brushing her coat, his pale amber eyes lowered. He did not ask her to abandon the dead. He only offered the warmth of the living. The wedding ring slipped from Nora's fingers and swung softly against the chain. Archer lowered his voice. "Leaving tonight doesn't mean you're betraying him." Nora's mouth tightened. "It means tomorrow," he said. "Someone will still be here to remember how he built the cabinets wrong and pretended it was a design choice." For a moment, she looked offended. Then her face broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a collapse around the eyes, as if she had been holding up the roof by herself and had finally heard it creak. "He did build them wrong," she whispered. "I believe it. Every drawer sticks in July. Then the town needs you alive to complain about it." A sound escaped her that was half laugh, half grief. Nora placed one trembling hand on Bishop's head. The German shepherd closed his eyes. "All right," she said, "but I'm bringing his toolbox. Fair. And the blue quilt. Also fair. And if anyone at that cafe says I overpacked, I'll haunt them before I die." This time Archer did smile. "I'll warn Miriam." By the time Archer and Nora returned to River Lantern, the streetlights had begun to flicker. The cafe was crowded now, though not chaotic. Miriam had Nora seated near the stove within minutes, wrapped in the blue quilt, a bowl of soup in her hands, and Bishop at her feet. Leonard, the old man who had threatened to die for pie, made the mistake of asking if she had brought enough luggage. Nora looked at him over her spoon. "I brought enough dignity for both of us." The room laughed harder this time. Even Archer felt it move through him. Not joy, not safety, but something stubborn and human, a small fire refusing the weather. Then the lights went out. The cafe dropped into darkness. A woman gasped. Someone cursed. A mug hit the floor and broke. Outside, the whole town seemed to vanish at once, as if Bluefern Bend had been swallowed by the mountain. For 2 seconds, no one moved. Then Miriam's voice cut through the dark. "Nobody panic unless you know where I keep the good candles." A lighter sparked, then another. Flashlights blinked on across the room. Oil lamps appeared from shelves and cupboards. Within minutes, River Lantern was lit by a dozen trembling flames. Faces gathered around them like old travelers in a myth, waiting for the storm god to decide whether he was merciful. Claire's radio crackled from the counter. "Power's out town-wide," she said. "Siren system is down. Back up. Not responding." Elise closed her eyes. Archer looked toward the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, he could barely see the direction of River Watch House, but he felt it before he heard anything. A low vibration under the floorboards of the cafe, faint but growing. Bishop rose. His body went rigid. This time, he did not growl. He howled. The sound tore through the cafe, deep and long, silencing every voice. It was not fear. It was not grief. It was warning sharpened into sound. Archer was already moving before the howl ended. He ran through the rain toward the truck, Bishop at his side. The road shone black beneath the storm. Water coursed along the gutters, carrying leaves, ice, and small branches. Behind him, Elise shouted his name, but he did not stop. By the time he reached River Watch House, the porch light was dead. The river below was no longer hidden by darkness. It moved with a pale, violent shine beneath the storm, swollen and restless. Archer's flashlight beam cut across the dock just as something large came spinning out of the black upstream current. A wooden utility crate slammed against the outer piling. The impact cracked through the night. For one breath, the crate rolled in the eddy near the dock, caught in the beam of Archer's flashlight. Faded white lettering showed through the rain. Upper Release Station, Gate Service. Then the current seized it and dragged it away into the dark. Archer stood motionless, rain running down his face. Bishop stood beside him, chest heaving, eyes locked on the river. A crate from the Upper Release Station did not drift loose for no reason. Something had broken upstream. A station did not drift loose for no reason. Something had broken upstream. The flood was no longer a warning in an old ledger, no longer a bad reading, no longer a fear passed between cautious people in a cafe. It was coming. The flood did not arrive as a wall. It arrived as a mistake in the map. At first, River Street looked merely wounded by weather. Rainwater sheeted over the asphalt, carrying pine needles, leaves, and bits of broken ice toward the drains. The yellow lamps outside River Lantern Cafe glowed through the storm like tired stars. People moved in and out with bags held over their heads, voices raised against the rain, trying to make fear sound like practical business. Then Elise Trask came running from the lower road with mud up to her knees. "The North Channel is opening," she said. The words landed in the cafe harder than thunder. Claire Haddon turned from the radio table. "That channel's filled." "It was filled," Elise said, breathing hard. Rain ran from her hair, down her jaw, onto the collar of her field jacket. The old bend cut through the weak bank, and water's crossing the alder flats. For 1 second, no one understood. Then Hollis Baird, sitting near the stove with a blanket over his shoulders, lifted his head. "God help us," he whispered. "It found the old road." Archer Boone looked at the map spread across the cafe counter. Claire had marked the evacuation route in red earlier that evening, a clean line leading from the low homes up toward the Ridge Road. Elise reached across the counter, took the pencil from Claire's hand, and drew a rough blue slash across that same route. "There," she said. "That's water now." The cafe went quiet in a way Archer knew too well. Not panic yet. Something worse. The first breath before panic decided what shape to take. Miriam Loxley broke it. "All right," she said sharply, tying her brick-red apron tighter around her waist, as if going to war against the weather itself. "Nobody gets to faint unless they do it somewhere useful. Claire, tell us what changes. Elise, stop bleeding mud on my floor unless that mud comes with instructions." A few nervous laughs flickered and died, but they bought the room 3 seconds of courage. Claire grabbed the radio. "All units and volunteers, route change. Ridge Road lower approach is compromised. Use Millstone Hill. Repeat, Millstone Hill only. No one takes Alder Flats." Static answered, then scattered voices. Archer stepped toward the map. His old olive-gray tactical shirt was damp at the shoulders. Rain had darkened the fabric and made the frayed cuffs cling to his wrists. Bishop stood beside him, cream-gray coat wet along the back, pale amber eyes following every movement in the room. "Who still needs moving?" Archer asked. Claire pointed to the list. 2 rentals near the ferry road, a couple of river cabins. Hollis's neighbor already came in. Nora's safe. We still need a check on the old ferry shed. Hollis stood too quickly. The blanket fell from his shoulders. Archer turned. "No." Hollis looked at him, pale eyes suddenly hard. "I didn't say anything." "You didn't have to." The old man's hand had gone to the pocket where he kept his brass ferry whistle. His wax-brown coat hung near the door. His boots were already angled toward it, as if some part of him had started leaving before the rest of him dared confess why. Claire saw it too. "Hollis." He looked away. Miriam's face softened. "What's in the shed?" Hollis swallowed. For once, his humor had deserted him completely. "Ellen's journal." No one spoke. Rain hammered the windows. The river made a deep animal sound somewhere beyond the buildings. Hollis's voice cracked in spite of his effort to keep it firm. "She wrote every crossing we ever made. Weather, names, river height. Foolish things I said. Last winter before she got sick, she wrote less, but she still wrote. I thought I'd moved it up to the house. I didn't." Claire's expression tightened. You are not going down there. Hollis smiled then, but it was an old, ruined thing. Deputy, I've been obeying younger people all night. Don't make a habit of it. Archer stepped between him and the door. You go. Someone has to come after you. Hollis met his eyes. Then don't. It was the kind of answer only grief could give. Stupid, brave, selfish, holy. Archer hated it because he understood it. He glanced down. Bishop was no longer beside him. The German shepherd stood near the cafe door, head lowered, ears forward, body aimed toward the old ferry road. Archer felt something inside him go cold. Hollis, he said quietly, when did you last see the journal? In the lockbox by the west wall. At the shed? Hollis did not answer fast enough. Claire cursed under her breath and grabbed her radio. Check Old Ferry Shed. Does anyone have eyes on Old Ferry Shed? Static. Then a volunteer's voice came through, broken by rain. Negative. Ferry road's taking water. Can't get close. Hollis reached for his coat. Archer caught his wrist. The old man looked at the hand holding him, then at Archer's face. For a moment, they were not two men arguing in a cafe. They were two survivors standing on opposite sides of the same truth. The dead could still command the living if love had nowhere else to go. I'll go, Archer said. Elise turned sharply. Not alone. No. Bishop gave one low bark, as if the matter had been settled without them. Miriam shoved a coil of rope and a flashlight into Archer's hands. Bring back the man if he's foolish enough to have gone. Bring back the journal if God is feeling generous. Bring back yourself regardless. Archer looked at Hollis. You stay here. Hollis's jaw trembled. If it's gone, then it's gone, Archer said. But you won't be. The old ferry shed crouched near the low bank half a mile from town, where the old crossing had once carried workers, farmers, lovers, and quarrelsome husbands across the Skagit before the bridge made it unnecessary. Now it sat in the dark beyond a field of flooded grass, its tin roof rattling under the rain. Archer, Elise, and Bishop reached the edge of the ferry road in Claire's patrol truck, lights off for visibility in the rain. Water already ran across the gravel in thin brown sheets. Elise stepped out and swept her flashlight across the field. This is worse than 20 minutes ago. Fast water changes its mind fast, Archer said. That's not comforting. Wasn't meant to be. Bishop moved ahead, not rushing, testing the ground with each step. Archer tied the rope around his own waist, looped the other end around the tow hook of the truck, and handed Elise the slack. If I go down, don't be heroic, he said. Elise gave him a flat look. That sentence has never worked on anyone. Try anyway. They moved into the water. Cold struck Archer's legs like steel. It rose to his shins, then his knees, as the road dipped. The current was not deep enough to sweep him at first, but it had muscle. It pressed sideways, impatient and hungry. Bishop stayed slightly ahead, choosing the shallower line instinctively, his cream-gray coat nearly silver in the flashlight beams. Twice he stopped and redirected them around holes where the gravel had washed out. The shed door banged open and shut in the wind. Hollis! Archer shouted. No answer. They reached the porch as the first loose board tore free beneath Elise's boot. She slipped hard, her body pitching toward the black water beyond the steps. Archer caught her by the back of her jacket and hauled her against the wall. For one terrible second, the sound of the river changed. It was not the Skagit anymore. It was another flood in another country. Night, smoke, broken concrete, a voice on the radio. Boone, I can't hold. I'm coming. Water's at my chest. Hold on. Boone. Archer's hand locked on Elise's sleeve. His body stopped obeying the present. The rain, the shed, the rope around his waist, all of it slid away beneath the roar in his skull. Then pain snapped through his arm. Bishop had seized his sleeve in his teeth and pulled. Not hard enough to tear, hard enough to demand. Archer looked down. The dog's eyes were fixed on him, amber and alive, furious with loyalty. Archer dragged air into his lungs. Rain, cedar rot, river mud, Elise breathing against the wall. Not smoke, not radio static, not that night. He released Elise carefully. You good? She nodded, face pale. I was going to ask you that. Later. Inside, the ferry shed smelled of wet wood, oil, and long storage. And water pushed under the door in brown tongues. Old life jackets hung from hooks. A cracked sign read, Baird Ferry Service in faded blue paint. Hollis, Elise called. A thump answered from the far side. They found him on a raised wooden platform near the west wall, one leg twisted awkwardly beneath him, both arms wrapped around a small tin box. His knit cap was gone. Rain blew through a broken window behind him. You absolute fool, Elise said, and there was so much fear in her voice it came out like anger. Hollis blinked at them. That you, Trask? No, it's the river's welcoming committee. Archer climbed onto the platform. Can you stand? Can complain. Does that count? Always. The tin box was dented but dry. Hollis held it like a wounded bird. The journal? Archer asked. Hollis looked down. His face changed. He opened the box with stiff fingers. Inside were photographs, a ferry license, old ticket stubs, and a pressed flower browned with age. No journal. Hollis stared into the box as if the missing book had taken the last of the room's air with it. It was here, he whispered. I swear it was here. A crash sounded outside. Elise ran to the door. Water's rising. We have to move now. Hollis did not respond. Archer crouched in front of him. Hollis. The old man's eyes were wet, though whether from rain or grief no one could tell. Her handwriting was in that book. I know. You don't. Archer held his gaze. I know what it is to keep listening for a voice you're not going to hear again. That reached him. Not fully, but enough. Hollis let Archer take the tin box. Then Archer hauled him upright, got one of the old man's arms over his shoulders, and began moving him toward the door. The way back was worse, and the water had risen to Archer's thighs. Elise carried the flashlight and kept the rope from tangling. Bishop moved ahead, then circled back, restless but controlled. Rain struck the water so hard the surface looked alive with needles. Halfway across the flooded road, Hollis's injured leg buckled. Archer tightened his grip. Leave the box, Hollis gasped. No. Damn you, leave it. No. The current hit them from the side. Elise slipped again, but Bishop slammed his body across her knees, blocking her fall long enough for her to catch the rope. Archer braced, teeth clenched, dragging Hollis one step, then another, every muscle burning with cold. At last they reached the higher gravel near the truck. Claire's headlights appeared through the rain. She had come down as far as she dared, emergency lights painting the water red and blue. Down as far as she dared, emergency lights painting the water red and blue. Together they pulled Hollis up the bank. The old man collapsed onto the wet gravel, clutching the tin box to his chest. Then, as if some last string inside him had snapped, he turned his face toward the flooded shed. The journal's gone, he said. No one answered. No one knew how. Bishop, still breathing hard, suddenly turned and trotted down toward the edge of the shallows. Bishop, Archer warned. The dog did not go far. He lowered his head near a cluster of branches caught against a fence post. His jaws closed around something dark and waterlogged. He pulled once, then again, dragging a small cloth bundle free from the debris. Archer took it from him. It was not a journal. It was an old wool scarf, blue-gray, soaked through and tangled with river grass. Hollis made a sound that broke the night open. Archer brought it to him. The old man took the scarf with both hands, pressing it to his mouth, his shoulders folded inward. He did not weep loudly. He simply bent over the last thing the river had failed to steal. Ellen made this, he whispered. Said the color made me look less like a boiled turnip. Elise knelt beside him, one hand on his back. Even Claire looked away. For a moment, the storm allowed them that small mercy. Then the radio at Claire's shoulder shrieked with static. A voice broke through, ragged and almost unrecognizable. Claire, Elise, anybody reading? Claire snatched the radio. Identify. More static. Then Walt Dennison's voice came through, thin with fear. It's Walt. I'm at the upper auxiliary station. The secondary release is jammed. Manual lock won't respond from here. Elise stood slowly, Walt's breathing crackled over the channel. If someone doesn't get up here and open it by hand, the second surge hits before dawn. The rain kept falling. The river kept rising. And Archer, with Bishop pressed against his leg and Hollis sobbing over a scarf in the mud, understood that the night had only finished its first demand. River Watch House had stopped being a refuge. By 2 a.m, it had become the heart of the emergency. Maps covered Archer Boone's kitchen table. Some were official, printed in clean colors and careful lines. Others were old and hand-marked, their edges curled from years of damp air. A radio sat beside the stove, spitting static between broken voices. Oil lamps burned along the counter, their flames trembling every time the wind pressed against the walls. Outside the wide windows, the Skagit River had climbed high enough to catch the dim light from the house. It moved in dark, muscled sheets beyond the porch, no longer beautiful, no longer distant. Water slapped against the lower steps as if testing them. Archer stood over the map with one hand braced on the table. His old olive-gray tactical shirt was soaked through at the shoulders. Mud streaked the knees of his combat pants, and his boots left brown water on the floor, but he no longer noticed. Bishop stood beside him, cream-gray coat damp and darkened along the spine, his pale amber eyes tracking every sound from the river. Elise Trask leaned over the radio, one hand gripping the edge of the table. Rainwater still clung to the loose strands of hair around her face. Claire Haddon's voice cracked through the speaker. "River Lantern is stable. Millstone Hill route is holding. We've got most of the lower homes cleared." "Most?" Archer asked. Elise pressed the radio button. "Define most." A burst of static answered before Claire came back. "2 cabins still being checked. Nora's safe. Hollis is sitting by Miriam's stove and insulting everyone who tells him to rest." Archer glanced toward Bishop. "That means he's fine." Then another voice broke through the static, thin, shaken, almost swallowed by the storm. "This is Walt Dennison. Is anyone reading me?" Elise snatched up the radio. "Walt, where are you?" "Upper Auxiliary Station." Claire cut in. "You were told to leave that area." "I know." The simple answer held too much fear. Archer straightened. On the radio, Walt breathed hard. Behind his voice came a distant metallic banging, then the low, continuous thunder of water moving where it should not have been moving. "The secondary release is jammed," Walt said. "Manual lock won't respond from the control room. The remote system keeps cycling, but the gate isn't moving." Elise closed her eyes once, briefly. "What happens if it stays closed?" Claire asked. Walt did not answer right away. That silence told them more than a number could. Elise's voice sharpened. "Walt, if it stays closed," he said, "pressure builds behind the upper basin. If the main spill overtops, the surge comes down all at once." "Toward town?" Archer asked. "Toward everything." The room seemed to shrink around the radio. Then Walt said the thing he had been holding back. "I knew the sensor line was wrong." No one moved. The rain kept beating the roof. Walt's voice cracked again, not from static this time. 2 days ago, maybe 3. I saw a mismatch in the lower readings. I thought it was debris. I thought I could clear it before anyone made noise. Then the new system kept reporting clean, and I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was old. Maybe I didn't understand the update." Elise's face had gone very still. Walt swallowed audibly over the radio. "I didn't want to stand in front of the council and say I needed to shut down the festival because I couldn't trust my own equipment." Miriam's cafe, the maps, the old ledger, the people sleeping under borrowed blankets, all of it seemed to gather around that confession. Archer had expected anger to come. Instead, he felt something worse. Recognition. Not because he had made Walt's mistake, but because he understood the human weakness beneath it. A man afraid to admit uncertainty. A man hoping the world would give him one more hour to fix what pride had hidden. The river did not give hours. Elise lifted the radio to her mouth. "You can apologize after the gate opens." Walt's breath shook. "It has to be done at the lower mechanical housing, outside. The access hatch is half flooded. I can't do it alone." Archer looked at the map. The upper auxiliary station sat on the hill road above the old North Channel, not far in miles, but the storm had turned distance into a living thing. Claire's voice came through. "I can send county rescue when they reach Millstone." They won't make it in time, Elise said. Archer was already reaching for the coil of rope near the stove. Bishop rose. Elise looked at Archer. You don't have to. Yes, he said. I do. She seemed about to argue, then didn't. Perhaps she heard the difference in his voice. Not eagerness, not heroics, only acceptance. Claire came over the radio again. Boone, don't do anything stupid. Archer clipped a flashlight to his belt. That depends how wide your definition is. Too wide. Then I'll disappoint you carefully. For one brief second, even Elise almost smiled. They took Claire's patrol truck as far as the ridge road allowed, and after that, the road became a broken ribbon of mud, ice, and running water. Rain turned to sleet again, slanting hard through the headlights. A fir tree had fallen across the lane, its roots torn up like an old wound. Beyond it, the hill climbed into darkness. Walt's service truck waited ahead, crooked near a ditch, hazard lights blinking weakly. The man himself stood under the partial shelter of the station fence, burnt orange jacket soaked dark, reflective strips flashing each time lightning glowed behind the clouds. His black knit cap was pulled low, his face pale and wet, and the heavy ring of keys in his hand shook so badly it made a constant metallic chatter. Elise climbed out first. For a moment, she and Walt only looked at each other through the sleet. I should have called, he said. Yes, she replied. I know what you thought. That was all she gave him. Not forgiveness, not cruelty, just the truth, placed between them like a tool neither could avoid. Archer moved past them, studying the slope, the station housing, the runoff cutting across the gravel. Bishop pressed close to his left leg, then stopped sharply near a patch of dark mud. The dog lowered his head. Archer aimed his flashlight. The surface looked solid, but water pulsed beneath it, making the ground breathe. Not there, Archer said. Walt stared. That's the service path. Not tonight. They took the longer way along the fence, stepping over loose stones and through knee-deep runoff. Twice Bishop halted and redirected them around ground that had softened beneath the grass. Once, a section of bank collapsed behind them with a wet, heavy sigh. At the mechanical housing, the sound of water became enormous. The lower access hatch sat in a concrete recess below the main platform. Brown water surged around it, rising to the bottom edge of the steel door. The manual wheel was inside. Walt wiped rain from his face. I have to get down there. Archer tied a rope around Walt's waist, then anchored the other end to the steel railing. His hands moved with old precision. Rope, knot, check, pull, check again. Walt watched him. You military? Was. Navy? Archer looked at him. Walt nodded once, as if that explained both too much and not enough. Elise crouched beside the hatch with a wrench and a pry bar. Water's already above the lower seal. Once we open this, it's going to come in fast. Then we do it faster, Archer said. Walt gave a short, frightened laugh. I hate that sentence. Good. It means you heard it. They opened the hatch. Water rushed around Walt's boots as he climbed down into the recess. Archer held the rope. Elise held the light and passed tools. Bishop stood above them, body tense, eyes shifting between Archer and the dark slope behind the station. The manual wheel inside the hatch was jammed. Walt strained against it. Nothing. He cursed, slipped, slammed one shoulder into the concrete, and tried again. Lock pin! Elise shouted over the water. Check the lower lock pin. I am checking it. Check it better. Walt's laugh this time was almost a sob. Archer leaned down, water splashing his face. Talk me through it. Walt looked up. Rain and fear streaked his pale face. If I pull the pin and the pressure's too high, the wheel could spin hard enough to break my wrist. Then don't leave your wrist in its way. Walt stared at him. You always this comforting? No. Bishop barked once, not toward the hatch, toward Archer. The sound snapped through him. Only then did Archer realize his own breathing had changed. The roar of water inside the housing had become another roar. The concrete walls had narrowed. The flashlight beam had turned to white glare on floodwater. Somewhere deep in his skull, a broken radio began to breathe. Boone, I'm coming. No time. Hold on. I said, hold. His hands locked around the rope. For one terrible moment, Archer was not at the station. But he was back in the dark of a failed extraction, water climbing faster than courage, faster than orders, faster than his body could move. The rope slipped half an inch through his fingers. Elise caught his wrist. "Archer." He did not look at her. "Archer," she said again, louder, not soft, but steady. "He's not the one you lost." The words cut through the noise. Walt was below him, alive, soaked, terrified, waiting. Elise's grip tightened. "You don't have to save the dead tonight," she said. "Only the people still waiting." Bishop pressed his wet head against Archer's chest, forcing himself between Archer and the edge of the hatch. Warmth, fur, breath, present. Archer closed his eyes once. Then he opened them. The station, the river, the rope. Walt, now. "Pull the pin," Archer said. Walt did. The wheel jerked violently. Archer held the rope with both hands as Walt slammed his shoulder into the wall and kept his wrist clear. Elise drove the pry bar into the locking gap. Metal screamed. The wheel moved an inch, then another. Walt began to turn it. One rotation, 2, 3. Somewhere beneath them, the gate groaned. The sound rolled through the concrete like an awakened giant. Water surged through the channel below, redirected with brutal force. Elise grabbed the railing as the platform shuddered. Bishop flattened his stance, claws scraping against wet metal. "Keep going!" Elise shouted. Walt turned the wheel again, face twisted with effort. "I'm sorry," he gasped. Elise looked at him through the rain. Walt's voice broke. "I'm sorry. I knew something was wrong." Her face hardened, but her eyes shone. "Then fix it." He turned the wheel one final time. A deep mechanical boom shook the station, and the secondary gate opened. For several seconds, no one heard anything but water. It thundered away from the upper basin, violent but controlled, pouring into the designed spill channel instead of overtopping toward the heart of town. The platform trembled beneath their boots. Rain and spray struck their faces. The night itself seemed to exhale. Claire's voice exploded over the radio. "Reading surge diversion. Main pressure dropping. Repeat. Main pressure dropping." Elise closed her eyes and lowered her head. Walt sagged against the hatch wall. Archer hauled him up by the rope, hand over hand, until the older man collapsed onto the platform, shaking too hard to stand. Bishop immediately stepped close and sniffed Walt's face. Walt gave a broken laugh. "I deserve that." "No," Archer said. "You deserve consequences. Different thing." Walt looked at him, too tired to defend himself. And then Claire's voice returned, strained beneath static. "Elise, Boone, do you copy?" Elise grabbed the radio. "We copy. Gate is open." "The town center is holding," Claire said. "But the redirected flow is pushing hard into the lower bend." Archer already knew before she finished. He could see it from the ridge. Far below, through rain and darkness, the little light of Riverwatch House trembled beside the swollen black curve of the river. The water was moving toward it now, drawn through the old channel, taking the path that would spare the crowded streets. Claire's voice softened in a way Archer had not heard before. "Archer, your house is in the line of it. You need to get out of there if you haven't already moved everything." The words hung in the storm. Your house. He almost corrected her. It was not his house. Not really. It was a retreat property, a temporary place. A roof assigned to him by program and paperwork. A stop along the road for a man who had told himself he no longer belonged anywhere. But he saw the porch light in his mind, the rug before the stove, Bishop lying by the door, the old wooden plaque that read, "River Watch House." For the first time in years, he had almost wanted to stay somewhere. Archer stood in the rain, looking down at the small light by the river. Bishop leaned against his leg. The town behind that light was still alive, and the river had chosen its price. Dawn did not break over Bluefern Bend like victory. It came slowly, gray and exhausted, crawling over the mountains through veils of spent rain and ragged mist. The storm had passed, but it had left its fingerprints everywhere. Water dripped from roof lines. Mud covered the road in long brown scars. Broken branches lay across yards. A dock had folded against the bridge like a snapped rib. Still, the town remained. River Lantern Cafe glowed at the center of it. its windows fogged from too many bodies, too much coffee, too much fear held through the night. Adults slept in chairs with coats over their shoulders. Pet carriers lined the wall near the stove. A tired man held a sleeping terrier against his chest. Nora Voss sat near the window, wrapped in her blue quilt, one hand closed around the wedding ring on her chain. No one had died, and that fact moved quietly through the cafe, too large to celebrate at first. Claire Haddon stood by the counter with a radio in one hand and a pencil behind her ear, taking reports in a voice made hoarse by the night. Her uniform was streaked with mud. Her eyes were red with fatigue. But she was still standing, and in Bluefern Bend that morning, standing had become a form of grace. Elise Trask sat at a corner table, both hands wrapped around a mug she had not drunk from. Her field jacket was soaked through, her hair half loose around her face. She looked toward the river, though the cafe wall stood between them. Archer Boone entered without speaking. Bishop came beside him, limping slightly from exhaustion rather than injury. His cream-gray coat darkened with rain, mud dried along his legs. Heads turned. Some people looked as if they wanted to thank Archer. The others looked as if any word might break what little composure they had left. Miriam Loxley saw that first. She put a mug of coffee into Archer's hands before anyone could trap him inside gratitude. "Drink," she said. "Heroes are annoying when they faint." "I'm not a hero." "Good. Then you'll drink without making a speech." He drank. The coffee was bitter, hot, and real. Claire lowered her radio. "Lower Town is clear. Millstone route held. 2 houses flooded at the back. 3 sheds gone. 1 road washed out." "And River Watch?" Elise asked quietly. No one answered. Archer already knew. He had seen it from the ridge before descending. The river had done what the river did. It had chosen low ground. It had spared the crowded streets by taking the bend. His bend. The house sat half an hour later under a sky the color of wet ash. The dock was gone. Not damaged. Gone. And only 2 broken pilings remained, leaning in the current like old teeth. The porch had twisted sideways. Mud climbed the steps and streaked the cedar siding. One of the wide front windows had cracked from corner to corner, though somehow it had not shattered. Archer stood at the edge of the yard with Bishop beside him. For a moment, he could not move. He had told himself it was not his house. It belonged to a program, to paperwork, to someone's good idea about where broken soldiers might rest. He had been there only a handful of days. He had not hung pictures. He had not unpacked the photographs still tucked in his duffel. And yet, seeing it wounded hurt him. That surprised him more than the loss. Pain meant attachment. Attachment meant some gate inside him had opened when he was not watching. He had come to Bluefern Bend to be temporary. The river had mocked him for it. Elise stood a few paces behind, saying nothing. Claire waited near her truck. Miriam had come too, carrying a thermos and pretending that was the reason. Hollis Baird leaned on a borrowed cane, the old blue-gray scarf of his wife wrapped around his neck. He looked at the ruined dock with the expression of a man seeing both past and present washed into the same mud. Archer stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned but held. Inside, River Watch House smelled of wet ash, river silt, and cold wood. Mud covered the floor. The old rug near the stove was soaked and curled at one edge. The chair by the window had drifted into the kitchen doorway. Maps that had been spread across the table now clung to the floor in dark pulpy layers. The stove was dead. The room felt smaller without fire. Archer stood in the middle of it, boots sinking slightly into the mud. He had seen worse destruction. He had walked through buildings broken by blasts, fields torn by floodwater, rooms where silence meant no one was left to call out. This was not the worst thing he had survived. That did not make it nothing. Bishop entered ahead of him. The German shepherd moved slowly, nose low, reading the ruin in his own quiet language. He sniffed the overturned chair, the soaked rug, the cold stove. Then he circled once and lowered himself exactly where his bed had been, beside the dead hearth. Mud touched his chest. Water darkened the pale fur at his belly. He stayed. Archer stared at him. A laugh escaped him then, rough and unwilling. It broke halfway through and became something else. Bishop looked up, calm as a saint carved from storm clouds. "You stubborn old priest," Archer whispered. The dog rested his chin on his paws. He had not found a clue. He had not warned of another danger. And he had not performed some grand act of rescue. He had simply chosen the ruined room. And somehow, that was the thing that undid Archer. He crouched and placed a hand on Bishop's wet neck. Beneath mud and cold, the dog was warm, alive, present. Archer stayed that way for a long while, one hand on the dog, the dead stove before him, the river still moving beyond the cracked glass. Behind him, Hollis stepped into the doorway. "House looks offended," the old man said. Archer wiped a hand across his face. "It has reason. Still standing, though. Barely. Barely counts after a night like that." Outside, the town began to gather without anyone calling them, not a crowd. Bluefern Bend was too tired for crowds. People arrived in pairs and small groups, carrying shovels, buckets, gloves, boards, coffee, crowbars, towels, and the solemn awkwardness of those who wanted to help but did not know where grief ended and cleanup began. Nora Voss came with her blue quilt folded over one arm. Miriam took one look at her. "You should be resting." Nora looked at the mud, then at Miriam. "I have rested through enough of my life." No one argued. By noon, the first layer of mud had been pushed from the front room. The broken maps were peeled away. The rug was dragged outside. Someone boarded the cracked window. Claire coordinated road checks between hauling ruined furniture to the porch. Elise measured the new water line on the siding and wrote it into her blue waterproof notebook with a hand that trembled only once. Walt Dennison arrived near mid-afternoon. He came alone. His burnt orange technician jacket hung heavy on his narrow shoulders. His face looked older than it had the night before. The ring of keys in his hand was still, for once, silent. Conversations dimmed when people saw him. He stopped at the edge of the yard, rain dripping from the brim of his black knit cap. "I need to say something," he said. No one made it easy for him. That was fair. Walt swallowed. "I saw warning signs in the system before last night. I told myself I could fix it quietly. I told myself I was protecting the town from panic. Truth is, I was protecting myself from embarrassment." The river moved behind him, indifferent to confession. "I was wrong," he said, "and if people had died, that wrong would have had names." Claire stood with her arms folded. "There will be an investigation. Your access to the system is suspended until county review." Walt nodded. "I understand." Miriam, who had been silent through all of it, walked to him and handed him a paper cup of coffee. Walt stared at it, as if it were a verdict he did not deserve. "It isn't forgiveness," she said. "It's coffee. Don't make it dramatic." A tired laugh moved through the yard. Even Walt almost smiled, though his eyes filled. That was Bluefern Bend's way, Archer began to understand. It did not erase what happened. It did not decorate failure and call it healing. But it also did not feed a man to the river once he had turned back toward shore. Later, as the sky cleared into a pale, fragile blue, Elise found Archer on the porch. He was holding the old wooden plaque that had once hung by the door. It had fallen in the flood and lay half buried under silt near the entryway. He had wiped away enough mud to reveal the words, "River Watch House." Elise leaned against the porch rail. "Claire and I talked." "That sounds dangerous." "It often is." He waited. She looked out over the ruined dock and the bend beyond it. "This place saved the town before anyone admitted the town needed saving. The house didn't do much." "No," she said. "But its location did. The old ledger did. You did. Bishop did." She paused. "It shouldn't go back to being a retreat house no one understands." Archer looked at her. Elise's voice grew careful, not because she doubted the idea, but because she understood its cost. "We could make it a community storm station, manual gauge, radio backup, emergency supplies, pet shelter space, someone on watch during winter rain events, not replacing the system, challenging it." He looked down at the plaque. "I'm not from here." Hollis, who had appeared near the steps with infuriating old man timing, snorted. "No one is from anywhere until they stay." Archer did not answer. "I was passing through once," Hollis continued. "Met a woman who laughed at my fairy knots. Married her 6 months later. Stayed 42 years. Passing through is just what people say before the road gets ideas. Miriam called from the yard. That may be the smartest thing you've ever said, Hollis. Write it down before I deny it. Archer looked at Bishop. The dog lay on the porch, head resting between his paws, facing the river. Of course he was facing the river. Weeks later, the house no longer looked like a wound. It did not look new either. No one wanted that. New things forgot too easily. The porch had been rebuilt stronger. A brass bell hung beside the door, polished but old, donated by Hollis from the ferry shed. A manual water gauge stood near the bank where the dock had once been. The cracked window had been replaced. Inside, shelves held blankets, batteries, first aid kits, sacks of dog food, lanterns, notebooks, and radios labeled in Claire's precise handwriting. Elise had designed a dual warning system, modern sensors, manual readings, and a handwritten log that would be checked when weather turned strange. Walt worked under supervision, quieter now, careful in a way that seemed less like fear and more like repentance. Miriam sent bread and coffee for every stormwatch shift. Nora donated the blue quilt to the cot by the stove, claiming it was too bossy to stay in her house. Archer stayed, not because the past had released him. It had not. Some ghosts did not leave. They only learned to sit farther from the fire. He stayed because pain, at last, had somewhere to go besides inward. And on the first night the new River Watch House opened, light glowed warm behind the windows. Outside, sleep began to fall again, softer this time, whispering against the roof instead of striking it. The Skagit moved through the dark, beautiful and dangerous, as all old powers are. Archer stood on the porch, one hand on the rail. Bishop rested beside his boot, scarred left ear tilted toward the river. The small metal drop on his collar caught the lamplight. Behind them, the stove burned steady. Ahead of them, the water spoke. Archer no longer heard it as a threat alone. He heard warning, memory, duty, mercy. He had not saved everything. The river had made sure he understood that. But Bluefern Bend still breathed. Nora still complained about Leonard's coffee habits. Hollis still wore Ellen's scarf. Elise still argued with maps as if they were stubborn old men. Claire still answered the radio. Miriam still fed everyone before admitting they were frightened. And Bishop, faithful Bishop, leaned his head lightly against Archer's leg. For the first time in years, the sound of rain on the roof did not become static in his mind. It became weather. Only weather. And inside that simple mercy, Archer Boone finally let himself rest. Sometimes God does not calm the river right away. Sometimes he gives us a light in the window, a faithful soul beside us, and the courage to stand watch through the storm. Archer could not save everything, but he learned that losing one place does not mean losing the purpose God placed inside him. Peace came not when the rain stopped, but when he chose to stay, to serve, and to let his pain become shelter for others. Maybe that is the quiet miracle we all need to remember. Even after loss, our hearts can still become a light for someone else. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what part stayed with you, and subscribe for more stories of courage, loyalty, and hope. May peace find your home, even after the hardest storms.